Good morning, Michigan. Matthew Walther has written an article in The Week called The Dark Decade Ahead. The Dark Decade Ahead. The churches are all closed, jets flying overhead, lunatics banging pots and pans. You've got masked joggers and masked pizza men and masked dogs awaiting testing and everyone in the park wearing masks. And a man spitting in the face of a clerk, alcohol sales increasing by 70% or more. Legal dope is available for curbside pickup. You've got standoffs, you've got the stockpiling of weapons, you've got protests and counter-protests with assault rifles at the state capitals. Hospitals aren't overwhelmed, but they're empty, and the staff is let go. You got yellow murder tape around merry-go-rounds in parks. And packages on doorsteps dropped by unseen people. And he says this is what the end of the end looks like. We asked ourselves how it would appear and when. And now, he says this is going to be a decade of immiseration on a scale unimaginable to at least 3 generations. Then he says, it's important to observe that this has happened because of the lockdown, not even proximately because of the virus, for which the median age of death is higher than the American life expectancy. Tony Daunt is on our AT&T line right now, the executive director of the Michigan Freedom Fund. It's a dark picture he presents there, talking about the revenge of nature. But he is citing the fact that there will be people who will die deaths of despair because of the loss of what they considered to be normal life.
Yeah, that's quite a dark start to Monday. But I haven't seen that piece. But quite frankly, it sounds exactly as like what we're living right now. And as a pessimist, a cynic, and in my Irish heritage, all of that is very inviting to fall into that kind of despair. But, I'm hopeful that enough Michigan residents, American citizens, American residents, will realize that that's a picture that we don't want to paint, that we don't want to continue painting, and we'll push back against this nonsense coming from our government at all levels. I think at the outset, as I've said numerous times on this show and elsewhere, a lockdown was probably necessary, and some of those drastic steps were necessary to get an idea of where we were, what was this virus, how serious was it, and we've had 2 months now to see kind of what the strategy should be, and this governor has done nothing to change course. All she is doing is basking in her power grab. I'll ask the question this way. She made an announcement on, I think it was Friday, about, the big manufacturing plants can go back to work. Well, you've got plants where hundreds of people are working in close proximity, and obviously precautions can be made, but it's okay for them to go back to work, but small businesses, barber shops, and things of that nature, that's not. I mean, where's the science in that, let alone the common sense? And that's the type of stuff where I think it leads to that dark thinking. And I think more and more people, as we're seeing, are just going to say, to heck with that. We're going to go about living our lives. We're going to do so safely and smartly, and basically dare the government to shut them down. And I think you'll see the public take the side of the people daring the government to do that.
There are examples of that, and there are people who will say things like, wow, I can go into a big box store, but I can't go into a big old church.
It's exactly right. I had dinner with my mom last night, with my family for Mother's Day, and didn't even get to hug or give my mom a kiss on Mother's Day because I still, my parents are a little bit older. I want to make sure that we're taking the appropriate precautions. But they made that exact point. Like, we can go into Meijer, but we can't go to church with certain precautions. And that's a very valid point. And I think it is creating unnecessary stress. It is making the supposed cure, much worse than the virus. And I think we really need to take a look at the impact this is having. And let's use some common sense. Let's use some science in this, not just fear and fear-mongering. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing from the governor's office.
Well, you never know what to believe. You hear about the numbers coming down, and right away on the heels of that, you'll hear somebody say, oh, but there was a flare-up. There was a flare-up in, Spain or wherever it might be, or Texas or Florida, who knows. And the fear seems to be the number one operator at the moment. And then I understand that the whole reason about sequestering people or quarantining them was to make sure there wasn't an overburden on the hospitals, which are now empty.
Exactly right. And I think we've seen a lot of goalpost moving from politicians and some of their...
There was a victory, right, that Cobo Hall had 1,000 beds. They used 3 of them.
I mean, that's fantastic. And I don't think people... I certainly don't question the thought of or the idea behind creating field hospitals like that and being prepared, that we should be prepared, we should take precautions. But you had one of the administrators of Hillsdale Hospital write an open letter a week or so ago to the governor, pointing out that if this keeps up for much longer, they're going to have to shut their doors completely because they just don't have the income to stay afloat. And that just makes no sense. It is such an overreaction, and it is such based on fear, and the goalposts continue to move. You laid it out. This was about making sure our healthcare system was not overloaded and that when people got sick, they could receive treatment that was necessary. We have done that admirably. And now it's moved into we got to make sure that there's no more cases, or that the cases are going down, or even, the governor makes a statement about, there's really a possibility we'll never get back to normal. And talk like that. That's just fear. And that is not doing anybody any favors and will not lead to any kind of return to normalcy. We need to take precautions, have good hygiene, stay away from really large groups. I was supposed to go to a couple concerts this week, one of my favorite bands, and I don't get to do that. I fully understand that. I wouldn't want to go to a facility with 20,000 screaming people right now. But we should be able to go back to church. We should be able to open up small businesses. We should be able to go back to some semblance of normalcy and an economic restart.
Well, for a group called the Michigan Freedom Fund, this has been a very interesting time. Google the Michigan Freedom Fund and subscribe for free to the Front Lines for Freedom, or support them financially if you choose.